I think that he is still very much involved in what's going on with the prosecution of the war. Now, the general staff in the military is going to be the one that's really driving the strategy. And there have been reports in the past, over the last 2 years, that occasionally Putin has stepped in and micromanaged to a degree, but it is going to be the military that's going to have sort of the day-to-day
Right.
functioning on their mind of what's going on. The new minister of defense, I think, is going to be more of a manager of defense procurement, of the defense budget, of trying to sort
Right.
of clean up some of the mismanagement that's going to be that the outgoing minister Shoigu is going to be blamed for.
The new defense minister, to me, almost harkened back to the appointment of Robert McNamara for JFK, where you go, well, heaven forbid, it's not somebody with a military background. Okay. It's somebody who's an economist or a McKinsey type, you name it, or that. It's how unusual is it for them to have almost a U.S. model of a non-military type running defense?
Well, civilian defense ministers have been in that position in the past in Russia, so that's been changing over time, and I think it's probably going to be more common going forward, especially because I think for running the Ministry of Defense, a lot of this is going to be about defense procurement. How do you get the tanks and the armor, the other things that Russian forces are required to have for conducting these offensives? And there are problems in some of these areas, and so I think the new minister Belousov, that's going to be a big part of his overall job in this role.
Hey, Alex, can you give us a sense here of how strong the position of Mr. Putin is within Russia, given that we're into this war for a prolonged period of time? It's probably not anything that he or his leadership group signed up for initially. How is his support within Russia? Is that even a debate point anymore?
At the moment, it's not really. I think, I think coming out of this election, what Putin wanted to show with the number, the 87% number of his victory, whether that was real or not, but what the signal that he was sending to the Russian public is that status quo going forward. This is the way in which the war is going to be prosecuted. He's not making substantial changes. So even as we're seeing some of these cabinet shuffles with some new people sort of being transferred around, I think the message there is kind of similar, that the overarching sort of structure of Putin's government, the overarching policies are going to be very similar. It's more about trying to fine-tune things. You have someone coming into the defense ministry with this economic policy background. The economic team has been very important to Putin in being able to prosecute this war over the last 2 years in the face of the sanctions that the U.S. and the EU and others have been imposing. So I think we're looking at sort of technocratic fixes going on here.
I think of Robin Brooks, but there's many others out on Twitter saying the sanctions are baloney, that they've been expert at avoiding the sanctions, going around them, doing different paths, whether through Uzbekistan, this stand, or the other stands. How effective have the sanctions been, Alex Brideau?
I think that they've been very mixed in terms of their overall results. Some of the effects, I think, are not going to be felt for years. Things that are designed to try and curb Russian revenues from oil and gas and LNG production. Those are going to play out over a much longer time frame. But what they have not been able to do is completely blunt Russia's ability to put forces in the field and to take additional territory, as we've been seeing just over this past weekend. I think the U.S. and the EU are going to focus still aggressively on trying to limit that sanctions evasion that the Russians are conducting. And so I think you've seen a lot of outreach, and a lot of tension between the U.S. and China over this issue. And I think that's probably going to continue, where there's going to be pressure coming from Washington, whether we're talking about China, Kazakhstan, countries in the South Caucasus, to limit what the Russians are able to do to evade the sanctions regime.